Hello there, and welcome along to Season 3 and Episode 12 of the Gardener Ben podcast. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you in association with Peter Beals Roses, crafting timeless roses since 1968 and winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com. Well, for those of you listening in real time, welcome back to the Gardener Ben podcast and of course a very happy new year to you all. I hope that you all had a wonderful festive break, whatever that looks like in your households, and that you had a happy and safe new year. 2026 has started very, very quietly in our household, with the weather changing to become incredibly cold and frosty. We plunged to -6 last weekend, which was a really nice surprise for those of us that don't often get weather that cold. Even our raised tank water feature froze over, creating a stunning abstract ice sculpture as the pump continued to recirculate water over a period of days. The first thing I want to talk to you about on the podcast as we enter the new year is there's absolutely no rush for you to be getting on and doing anything whatsoever in the garden. The garden, like its gardener or its caretaker, should be enjoying a nice slow start to the new year. We have only just really entered winter and it needs to be allowed to do its thing. The garden needs to slumber. The creatures and the insects need somewhere to hide and keep warm, and obviously the mammals that use the garden need to continue to go about doing their business. So if you are out and about doing anything whatsoever over the next few weeks, please do make sure that you tread lightly, you go carefully and you move slowly, because everything else in the garden is taking a well-deserved rest. There's absolutely no rush for you to get out and do anything whatsoever. We have approximately 12 to 16 weeks to get on with some of the winter tasks before spring really starts to arrive. So over the next few months on my social media channels, I'm going to be touring you through lots of different topics, including the pruning of apple trees and pears, the building of a new cloche in the garden, and of course touring you through how to train and prune roses such as bush roses, standard roses, and of course the climbing and rambling roses, which always seem to cause everybody so much of a problem. I once again must stress that there's absolutely no rush to be getting on with these things whatsoever, and the longer these are left sometimes the better. Winter will continue to do her wonderful thing, wiping the slate clean and cleansing the garden of harmful pathogens, fungal spores and diseases that we would really like to control and get rid of in the garden. The first things I will, however, be doing will be pruning my bleached lime trees, pruning the wisterias, and of course cracking on with starting to very, very slowly prepare the roses for their autumn and winter pruning. Every year on social media, I see more and more content creators getting caught up in the hype that is the 1st of January, feeling the pressure to start writing their seed journals, writing out when they're going to sow things and bed things out, and of course starting seeds off not only under grow lights but under heat lamps, on growing pads, and of course on their windowsills. Now, I mean no shade by this whatsoever, but it is far, far too early to be starting anything off whatsoever. And if you do want to start planning your growing season, the very most I would suggest you do is to get yourself a calendar and get your packets of seeds out of their storage containers. Working back from their cropping dates, you want to be planning your sowing accordingly and make sure that you have plenty of time to be growing on things that take a little bit longer to get themselves established. These items are normally aubergines, chilies, peppers and tomatoes, but it's still far, far too early to be thinking about sowing any of those things just yet. The loofah is another thing that comes round time and time again, as is the cup and saucer vine. These things take a long time to get themselves established, but I wouldn't be thinking about sowing any of these things if you're in a similar growing zone to me here on the south coast of England until around February the 14th. I don't really start growing anything in the greenhouse until at least Valentine's Day. The only thing I will be sowing come the end of January will be my sweet pea seeds, and of course I'll be online touring you through how I do that as well, as I have for the last few years. On to this week's guest, and just before Christmas I had the pleasure in having a conversation with Conrad, known as that Botanic guy on Instagram. He actually grows over in Ireland and is an account on Instagram that I've been following for many, many years. coveting his beautiful collection of tree ferns, houseplants, and other exotics that he gets to grow outside in his very sheltered garden. I hope that you enjoy the conversation that follows and that you head across to Instagram and give his account some love. Today on the Gardener Ben podcast, we're staying a little more local than we have done over the last couple of weeks, and we're heading off to Ireland and we're going to speak to Conrad, who self-confessed garden designer, freelance journalist, and plant pusher. Conrad, how are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been following your account online for quite some time, and it's one of those really lovely accounts which I like to get involved with. Now, I know obviously know what you do, but explain to the people listening along at home what it is that you're sharing online and what it is that you do.
Well, I suppose I describe myself as a self-taught novice gardener, but I'm an obsessive gardener.
Hmm.
I can't basically live my life without plants. I've had plants involved or in my life through, from childhood.
Yeah.
So it's not my full-time job. This is something I do on the side, but it's my obsession. It's the thing I sort of live and breathe every waking moment that I'm not at work or whatever. As I say, I'm sort of self-taught and have learned how to, grow plants since childhood, since I was about 7 or 8. And learned initially through books and magazines, and then late in later years through online chat rooms and forums, learning
Hmm.
about plants. And then with the advent of Instagram and social media, then that it's kind of just exploded even more. And you get to share your passion with people all over the world and get to introduce to people that you maybe wouldn't normally be able to interact with. So it's been a fantastic way of sharing what I do in this little wet corner of Ireland.
So whereabouts, tell everybody whereabouts it is that you're gardening.
So I'm up on the North Antrim coast of Ireland. So it's quite a mile position. I'm about maybe half a mile or so from the sea. So
Hmm.
we're lucky we get the benefit of the Gulf Stream coming up round the north coast. Generally in winter it's quite mild. We would get down to about -3 would generally be as cold as it would get,
Yeah.
but it's very wet. We could have anything. I think the average rainfall here is about 1.2, 1.3 meters, something like that. So
Goodness me, that is very wet.
yeah, it's very wet, and I grow quite a lot of exotic plants in the garden, but I also grow succulents. So succulents aren't maybe what you would normally associate with a garden in Ireland, but I like to grow a broad range of things
Yeah.
and work. I like to work with the climate as well, but also push things a bit as well.
It's something you've stolen my thunder a little bit there because one of the things that drew my attention to your account in the first place is obviously your use of tropicals, for instance, calla lilies and tree ferns and bananas and large bamboos, as well as your ability to grow succulents outside. Now, obviously, I'm renowned for quite a large collection of succulents and have a nice collection, but mine has to move very much indoors for the winter. I have to literally pick mine up and take it to out into the shelter of the greenhouse to maybe able to get it to survive. But you are quite happily growing quite a lot of yours outside, aren't you? Even in those wet conditions.
I am. It's a bit of what you're doing as well. So there's a bit of trickery going on too. I grow quite a lot of succulents in pots.
Yes.
So rather than growing like geraniums and those sort of bedding plants in pots,
Hmm.
I stuff my pots full of succulents and then move them out in the summer.
Yeah.
And they're fantastic container plants because I basically never have to water them. Although I'm an obsessive gardener, I'm also quite a forgetful gardener and a
Yeah.
bit lazy when it comes to watering. Luckily, because of our climate, I don't really have to water.
No.
But the succulents, I find they're the perfect plant to grow in containers and also window boxes. I've created window boxes stuffed with succulents, so rather than having them full of bedding plants, they're also full of succulents. But
Very
so the
nice
likes of
too.
plants that are in containers, they all get moved undercover in winter. Um, because it's not so much the cold here, it's the wet. I
Yes.
think I mentioned earlier that we only get down to about -2, -3 most
Hmm.
winters, which a lot of succulents would be more than able to handle. But
Yeah.
with our really high rainfall and then the cold weather mixed together, a lot of them would just turn to mush. So,
So you're
but
bringing
I
them. So
have
you're
sort
so
of
you so you're bringing them into a greenhouse or maybe a carport or a covered patio, that kind of thing.
it's kind of a it's a when we moved into the house that we're currently in, there was like the previous people had built like a sort of a shed, and it's a really drafty shed.
Hmm.
There's good airflow through
Oh,
it,
so that's
but
good. Yeah.
it's also got a perspex roof, so there's light coming in from above.
Oh,
So
perfect.
there's yeah, so it's kind of the perfect conditions for overwintering succulents because it's got the good airflow, but it's also bright and dry. And then
Hmm.
I don't heat it at all. So although the temperatures in around in the shed might get below zero because they're dry, they can handle the vast majority of them can handle it. Have very few losses every during the winter.
Yeah, yeah. For me, unfortunately, so the losses are sometimes even quite high. Bringing them into the greenhouse, the weather for us isn't as stable. Obviously, we're a little bit more inland here on the New Forest than you are where you are, and the temperature does bat around quite a lot for us. I mean, for instance, sometimes we've talked about this a lot. People probably get bored of me talking about the weather, but it's a very British thing to do, I suppose. The weather can vary from +10 degrees one day to about -7 the next. And it's that kind of thing that it's very difficult to juggle. So I have unfortunately lost quite a lot in previous years when you think, oh, the AI in the corner of the lounge, you ask it what temperature it's going to be overnight, and she very confidently says it's going to be -4. And you think, just, oh, well, okay, well, -4 under glass, that's going to be sort of just hovering above freezing. That'll be fine. And then you wake up and it's -8 and it's -4 in the greenhouse, and then it's kind of terminal. And you should have actually gone up and put the greenhouse heater on. So
Yeah,
that's where,
yeah.
unfortunately, where a lot of my losses come from. So the weekend was spent for me wrapping up the tree ferns. Obviously, you grow loads of tree ferns. Your garden's very, very heavily planted with foliage plants, and you can manage to keep again them outside all year round and pretty much unprotected.
Yeah, they are. They're completely unprotected beyond what, a bit of leaf litter will fall into the crown in the autumn, so that's really the only protection that the crown gets, and they're
Yeah.
more than able to withstand those temperatures. Like if we got very cold, like the sort of temperatures you're talking about,
Hmm.
-7, -8, then I would have to wrap them and try and take better care of them over the winter. But with the sort of temperatures we get, they're fine. Now that's not to say I don't ever lose plants. About I think it was in the 2010 winter, 2009,
Yeah,
2010,
that one
we
was
get
very,
down
very
to
cold. Yeah.
yeah, it was very cold. Now we get down to -9 here. I think it was -8, -9, and I had built up a collection of tree ferns before. I think at about 15, it was a small garden. It was kind of a very small suburban garden, smaller than the one that we currently have. And I was modeled it on kind of a clearing in a New Zealand forest. So there was like a kind of a circle of grass, and then it was surrounded by tree ferns around the
Hmm.
outside, all of various heights from a few inches up to about 6 foot. And they were all wiped out
Oh,
back in that
goodness
winter.
me,
And I
that's
always swore I would
heartbreaking.
never grow tree ferns again, but the call of them is too strong.
Too strong. It's really interesting you should mention that winter because we've had several over here that have been particularly cold on the mainland of the UK. And that particular one that you're mentioning, I was actually coming home from America. I spent 7, 8 weeks in America, and all flights in the UK had actually ground to a halt. All the airports were frozen and nothing was getting in. And I was very, very lucky to scrape back in on a flight from Washington, DC, about 3 days before Christmas. It was so cold, even down here on the south coast near Bournemouth, we are. The actual sea in parts froze. It was that cold.
Yeah,
So it was brutal. And then, of course, we had the Beast from the East, which came in 2017 into 2018. And that was the year we actually moved to this house. That was a particularly cold year. And my tree ferns were outside. It was at -25. They were double wrapped that year. I went
wow.
out and re-wrapped them. But again, they survived. Again, it's just keeping them water. But like the succulents, it's like keeping the water out of them that's the problem. They can take the cold, they just can't take the combination of the cold and wet together. So you mentioned your last garden. How long have you been gardening on your current site?
We moved here in the end of 2016, so we're coming up on what's that, 9 years now, which
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it, but the garden we had previously was on the same. We live in a small housing development, so it's just a suburban garden, but it was
Yeah.
just a few houses up the site. So whenever we moved out of that house, I basically moved the whole garden, lock, stock, and barrel, to the new place. So we were wheelbarrowing tree ferns down that were 20, or sorry, bamboos down the development about 25 foot high, and tree ferns and palms. So whenever we moved into this house, it kind of already had a certain level of look of maturity to it
Okay.
because I was moving large plants in.
Yeah.
Um,
And your obsession with plants doesn't really stop outside. It's like mine as well. You seem to have a fair collection of house plants as well.
I do a bit like everybody else during COVID and lockdown times. I didn't really have many houseplants before that. I don't know why. I kind of overlooked them. But during COVID, um, I started to collect a few houseplants as well. Now, I always said I was a definitely a houseplant killer, but I'm a kind of a reformed one. I don't I grow loads of unusual plants outside, but my houseplants I tend to go for ones that are a bit tougher and can take my
Bit more robust.
yeah, they can take the neglect that, if you forget to water them for a few days, if that, and they're starting to drip, if you give them water, they'll perk back up quite quickly. The likes of ferns and things inside, I
Yeah,
just can't grow because, if they dry out for a day, then they're gone.
they're too precious.
Yeah, yeah, they have to
Now
be
I know,
they
I
have to
know,
be tough to survive here.
I noticed as well. Instead, you also put your cheese plants outside during the summer.
Yeah, I do that with a few of the houseplants as well. They're down towards the back of the garden where it's a bit more shady and a bit more sheltered. I'll put some of the house plants out. The cheese plant will just stay in the pot and it'll just be kind of hidden in among the pot will be hidden in among other plants,
Hmm.
and it just lends that more kind of that exotic air that I'm after in the garden.
Because your garden is very heavily planted, and if you wouldn't sort of mind describing it for us, I mean, it's very lush, it's very green, it's absolutely packed full of plants. So what's the kind of planting list that you're working with?
Well, it's a south facing garden. I've never actually measured what size it is, but it's
Hmm.
maybe about 25 foot long, something like that, maybe about 30 foot long.
Yeah,
Um, And so the back of the house is south facing. So at, in that area, I tend to grow a lot of succulents. And at the base of the wall, where it's, where it's a real microclimate, I've got aeoniums and agaves and echeverias all planted in there, and they stay outside year round because they benefit from the shelter of the house and
yeah,
the reflected warmth. So from there, it kind of eases out then from a sort of more arid. Look, moving down the garden, there's a few different palm trees and restios, and then gets gradually more lush. So as I'm looking out the window at the back of the house, I just see tree ferns and bamboos towards the back, and then beyond that, there's trees in the neighbours' houses and the fields beyond, like sycamores and different plants.
yeah,
So it's one of those. They always talk about making your garden kind of blend into the landscape. So it really does. You can't really see where the garden ends, and it is from the house. It just looks like a foliage garden, but
hmm
when you're actually out in it, there are quite a few different flowers. I grow like dahlias and even roses, you'll be glad to hear, in the garden as well. Although they're in pots rather than in among the exotic plants. But
yeah,
so there's spots of colour in the garden. I always am inspired by the artist Henry Rousseau, the French artist.
hmm
Kind of that the look of his paintings is kind of something that I use as inspiration in the garden, mixing different colours and usual just colours and shapes and foliage types, different heights, and layering is really important as well.
yeah.
Layering vertically, but also, layering as I look down the garden so that you can't see it all at once, creating an air of mystery and you don't know where the boundaries of the garden are.
Yeah, it's something I think I've managed to achieve quite nicely, but people have told me that I've done that quite nicely with the garden here at North Lodge. There's about we're on a third of an acre, so it's a fairly decent sized plot, but there's plenty of little reveals as you move around the space. It's not one open plat. You sort of walk around and you've got little tiny garden rooms and little sort of spaces and little bits on the walls or benches hidden away, which gives you that sort of nice feeling of reveals as you move around. And I would always describe myself as being a very untidy garden. And obviously, 95% of everything I grow is either a rose or a herbaceous perennial. It's very English cottage garden style and very labor intensive. But I'm very messy with my style. Everything gets put in wherever I want it to do it. It sort of undulates and flows and moves backwards and forwards. I don't really pay a huge amount of attention to height or size. If I want to plant something right up close to the border, the edge of the border or the patio, I will, and that might get in the way of something else. And I'm not afraid to dig it up and move it about, which I've noticed you've done several times, haven't you? You've given your garden a good shuffle around, certainly down the side. Is it down the side of the house? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, we created a new garden down the side of the house. A couple of years ago, we knocked out a window and put in patio doors, so it's
Hmm.
east facing.
Oh,
So we
yeah.
have our coffee out there in the morning, when the sun's shining, and that side of the garden, yeah. Initially, it was going to be all just grasses, and because it's at that side of the house, we're kind of overlooking fields, so I
Yeah.
wanted to keep it a bit more naturalistic with grasses and kind of just that kind of more slightly wilder look. But then um, I managed to get three tree ferns, which I wasn't expecting to get. So they had to be
You're
somewhere.
gonna have to explain yourself. How does one just get three tree ferns that they weren't expecting?
Well, I got more than three actually. I, there's three in that area. I think there was nine in total. We were at a
Okay.
garden here in Ireland where the tree ferns had been growing for decades. They were introduced probably middle or early last century.
Hmm.
Um, but when, they've been with the Irish climate, it's very wet, it's very mild. They had actually started to spore out into the surrounding woodland.
Okay.
And so a lot of the tree ferns that I got from there are actually basically naturalized Irish tree ferns
Wow.
rather than ones that were imported.
Yeah.
The person who looks after the garden was concerned basically about them spreading out into the surrounding areas.
Hmm.
So he had started to remove the ones within the garden to kind of halt that spread. So when I was visiting, they were actually chainsawing massive tree ferns down, tree ferns that maybe have been about 15 foot high,
Yeah.
enormous things being cut into sections. So when I got back home, then later that, I think a couple of days later, I thought nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I emailed them and asked what was happening to them, and they were basically going to be chopped up and was composted, or um, so he said that if I wanted to come and get them, I was more than welcome to them.
Wow. That was a
So
bit.
I have,
So the universe basically paid you back for all those ones that you unfortunately lost, or not all
yeah,
of them, but yeah, they
quite a
came
few,
back
yeah.
around again.
So I took off one morning about 6 o'clock in the morning, drove across, probably about a 5 hour round trip to
Yeah.
get, and basically stuffed the back of the car with tree ferns, um, from, ones that were about a foot high up to ones that were about 6 foot high. And as I say, the
Wonderful.
majority of them were all naturalized Irish tree ferns dug up from the woodland. So
Yeah,
they're,
see that's absolutely astonishing to hear. I was talking to Kenny, who is the director of horticulture in Covent Garden. There, he's got a garden down in Plymouth, and his climate's very much like yours. His is very very wet all year round. So he again grows his tree ferns out in his little Victorian cottage sort of courtyard garden, and they're outside all year round. But to hear that they could actually sort of in any part of the UK, I mean, I know you're in Ireland, but they could actually sort of naturalize and actually start spreading is just astonishing for me to hear.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like down in County Kerry in the far south west of Ireland, there's gardens where they were planted last century. There's
Yeah.
one called Kells Bay, and I think they think there was initially maybe one tree fern planted in the old wall garden,
Hmm.
and then the garden was abandoned for I don't know many years. And basically, there's hundreds and hundreds of tree ferns within that wall garden as well, where they've just naturalized. And there's a few gardens like that down there. It's astonishing to see. We were at a garden or a couple of years ago, um, Derreen down in County Kerry as well. And we were literally, as we were walking through the woodland, we were walking over tree fern babies. They were just like a carpet on the ground, like by the tens of thousands of them,
Really.
absolutely everywhere. And it's only within the last 20 to 30 years, I think, that they've started doing that, which maybe shows the shift in climate,
Hmm.
that although it was always mild down in County Kerry, but it's just became even milder, but also wetter, and it just favours those tree ferns, those plants that love the wet, damp climate.
Yeah, I say it just blows my mind because I know. I mean, we'll move on from tree ferns in a moment. Otherwise, it will
Yes.
get a bit boring. But mine are very much a labour of love. We have a south-facing garden here, and I know they should be in shade, but they do take the sun. And I've got mine planted pretty much in full sun, which means the watering is really key. I have to water them twice a day, every single day. They have about 2 gallon of water into the crown of each of them to keep them moist and keep them sort of growing.
Wow.
But yeah, then they're planted alongside two ancient olives. So I've got this bit of a strange look. But again, we have a thatch, so the roof of the house is covered in straw, which for our American listeners is always quite a puzzlement. They're always
Yeah.
quite wowed by that. But yeah, the fronds up against the woodwork of the house, combined with the straw on the roof, is a really lovely combination. I'm sitting in the window, or looking out of a window now, and their fronds sort of bob about at the corner of this window, and I love seeing them out the corner of it. So your mine are very much a labour of love. They require an awful lot of attention from me, which I think why one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to them, because I feel like I have to sort of, I can't miss a beat, if you get what I mean. I have to water them at least twice a day during when the dawn. So when it's from about April all the way through to about the end of October, I'll have to water them every single day, twice a day, to keep them moving. And then I start wrapping them up for the autumn and winter, and put them to sleep. And then I don't tend to water them through again till the March. So I allow them to dry out a little bit.
See, again, for me, because of my climate, it suits me as a lazy, forgetful gardener. I never have to water mine. They're growing in almost full sun, and we get enough rainfall here that they entirely take care of themselves year round. So,
Wonderful. You mentioned earlier about some large bamboos as well. How do you get on with those in the garden? Do you find you have to put some sort of restriction in place to stop them spreading, or are you choosing the varieties you're growing in the garden carefully, the ones that aren't so invasive?
yeah, so I'm choosing the clump forming ones, pachymorph, that don't stray. So
Hmm.
although the clump will get wider itself over the years, they're not going to send shoots 10, 15 foot underground and
Yeah.
pop up in the neighbor's garden. I grow a couple. There's Berinda papyrifera, which has sort of icy blue culms, which
Hmm.
are quite nice, and then Berinda Lusciensis, I think it's called, or Berinda idalis. I think I've seen it listed as well. They keep changing the name of it, which is an enormous one. It's almost as tall. There's a sycamore in the field behind us, Acer pseudopatinus, and it's almost as tall as that.
Wow.
Um, but it's actually in the position where I just got a greenhouse earlier this year. It's still sitting in boxes, and the so it's in the prime position now where I'm going to put the greenhouse.
Okay.
It's a juggling act in terms of where it's a bit of a jigsaw in terms of what can go where. And I'm thinking that the greenhouse may have to the Berinda lusciensis might have to be dug up to accommodate the greenhouse. And then that means I can get rid of the shed that I had up at the which is joined onto the back of the house that I used over onto the succulents.
Yeah.
And then when that goes, then that'll create a new border that I'll be able to plant up with more sun lovers.
It sounds like you got some more shuffling to do, the same as I have here.
Yeah, never
It's
done.
no. There's always a plan. I've just I'm touring my followers and subscribers through at the moment the repurposing of my wildflower meadow, which I had always set aside here in the garden for just literally to be left alone. I planted it with a wildflower meadow, but the pressure of the garden and the ch and the change of what I do has meant that I'm now trying to house an awful lot more plants than I ever was. I reviewed 81 roses during this current rose review season, and I've got already 60 signed up for next year. There's
Wow.
only so there's only so much space that anybody has. So some have to go, and others I'm having to try and find a place to relocate. So I'm in the process of shuffling those about, but and adding a new wildlife pond to that garden as well. We've noticed that our CCT cameras a couple of months ago picked up a very young badger in the garden, and I thought to myself, how on earth? Because we're on a funny low plot here that half of the plot is at ground level, so the road to the west, And the plot to the east is actually held up by a 3 meter high retaining wall with a 2 meter high fence on top of it. So you think you're at ground level in main parts of the garden. You're not. You're actually on fairly well elevated ground. I thought, how on earth is this badger getting into the garden? And I found where he's coming. He's coming underneath the concrete footing boards of the fence over in the wildflower meadow. So I'm going to build a wildlife pond over there, and again attempt to leave that area as alone as possible because he's in the garden quite a lot. The cameras are picking him up on a regular basis. So I'm hoping he doesn't start doing too much damage to my lawn because they can be quite destructive. So
Yeah, they can be. Yeah,
yeah,
they tend to follow the same tracks in and out all the time, don't they, as well? And
yes,
there's
yeah,
certain routes that they like to use.
it's certainly a very much a creature of habit. He doesn't, and he seems to visit about. I say he. We don't know whether it's he or she, but visits about once every 3 weeks. So we're obviously on a looping tour of somewhere that they found something to come and snuffle about with.
He's waiting to see if you find anything really interesting that he can dig up and eat or chew.
Don't say that. I've got a very large family of moles that live in the garden. I try to be my very best to be very tolerant of them, but goodness me, do they cause some damage? Yeah,
We're lucky they didn't make it across to Ireland before the sea levels rose after the last ice age. So we've no moles here.
good for you. Good for you. So this one in particular comes up in my greenhouse. They come
Wow.
up in I come up in my raised bedding. There's concrete around the cast cottage. The roof drains straight onto a concrete path all the way around, and he comes up by the steps at the foot of the house. He comes up all over the dry. He's a little bugger.
Jeez.
Um, a couple of years ago, I was watering a raised bed, and it surfaced in the corner of this raised bed, and I instinctively just got hold of it by the scruff of the neck, and then I didn't know what to do with it. So I put it in a terracotta pot, and I walked it about half a mile down the road, thinking, well, I don't want to do it any harm, but I don't really want it in the garden. Anyway, within about 3 weeks, the blooming thing was back and,
A
and,
strong homing instinct.
and rampaging about. So never mind. I did try. Uh, going back to your garden, if there's one group of plants that you could really actually choose that you really feel passionate about, is there a group of plants that you simply couldn't be without?
I know that's the really difficult question to ask a gardener because it'll
Yeah,
depend on the day and it'll depend on the time of year.
yeah,
Um, I really love hedychiums, the ginger lilies.
yes, yeah,
So a lot of them are, there's like a lot of the genus would be tropical and subtropical, but there's quite a few from sort of higher elevations in the Himalayas that
hmm,
will flower early enough in our climate. So if I had space, I would love to grow loads more of them. There's Sidikim gardnerianum, and some of them are really beautifully scented as well. But then their season is so short, you might only get a couple of weeks of flowers from them, which then in a small garden like mine, do they earn their place? Um, I just love so many different plants. I love roses as well, and
yeah,
if I had more space and was maybe able to dedicate a certain not a bed of roses, but a mixed border or whatever filled with roses and different perennials, I would love to grow more of them.
yeah,
And then I don't want to start waxing on about tree ferns as well, but I love my tree ferns and
yeah.
anything in the Aralia family, so like tetrapanax and some of the cool fatsias and the scheffleras. I'm obsessed with hardy scheffleras too. So I don't know, does that answer your question at
Of
all?
course of course it does. Yeah, I mean, it's always very difficult. I only ever asked the question because everybody not bullied me, I suppose, but I was coerced into producing my most recommended collections and my best of collections. That's been going for about 5 or 6 years now, but I was sort of bullied into creating my best of collections and actually selecting my favorites, which I know is not really the done thing, but for what I do reviewing plants, it's something that I had to move into. So I always ask the question because I find it so interesting because most people like yourself that are obsessed and live and breathe plants and just literally so excited by them, they always find it very, very difficult to answer because
Mm.
there's always more than one, and you're quite right in saying that it depends on the season, it depends on the day of the week, and sometimes can very much depend on what the weather's doing. I mean, some things you mentioned there, one of your your subtropical plants that produces leaves nearly a meter across. I saw on your channels earlier. You know, that at certain times of year, I can assume just looks absolutely epic.
Yeah, yeah. I for from June up until now, although we've had a few gales blowing through, so it's looking a bit more moth-eaten at the edges. It'll lose its leaves now in the next few weeks, but
Yeah.
throughout the summer, the leaves on the Tetrapanax are, as you say, over a meter across, big jagged leaves, a bit like I was thinking of the scale of a gunner leaf, but
Yes. Yeah.
a large shrub, almost small tree.
Yeah.
It's unrivaled in terms of what we can grow here in Britain and Ireland. For the size and the scale and the drama of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually because I've been out. One of the few jobs I've managed to get done in the garden today is I have a foxglove tree, which
Mm,
is now really finding its stride. It was in a pot. It came with us from our last house because much like you, I moved my entire garden here from our last property. I moved 640 plants by lorry to this garden, and this was one of the plants that came with us. It's now in the ground and stretching up to about 18 foot high, so it's getting quite big now. The leaves on that are just about a foot to maybe to 18 inches across. And I have to physically make, and it's not my normal way in the garden because I'm quite relaxed with sort of allowing things to compost where they fall and make sure the borders are mulched and well fed. But the leaves on this particular plant, I have to pick up because if they drop on something, it basically excludes all the light. So I'm assuming with yours, you're also having to pick those up because those are enormous leaves.
yeah, I do. And you have to be careful with it as well because the Tetrapanax, it's got really fine hairs on the underside of the leaves and on the leaf stems, which if you breathe that in, it can really irritate
Oh,
your
so they're quite be irritable, yeah.
yeah. But yeah. So it's just if you imagine like a big, they're like big umbrellas almost, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't
Well,
collapse over
they're
the
the size of
plants
dustbin
that are
lids.
underneath. Yeah. Um,
So you're also gardening. Well, now we only have one, but you're also gardening with two dogs. Does
yes.
that pose many challenges for you?
Not not really. One of them's a Labrador and one is a French Bulldog, but they're actually for a Labrador. Robin is the Labrador, and she's quite a quiet, timid Labrador, so she doesn't tend to race about like you would normally expect a Labrador to do. So
Uh-huh.
they don't really do too much damage in terms of like running through plants. You get the occasional broken thing, but that's something you live with. It's not the biggest issue. I'm not, luckily, I'm not lawn proud. I do have a bit of lawn in the middle of the garden, but with two female dogs, it looks pretty ropey during the summer.
Yeah.
With yellow patches, and I do try to reseed them every so often, or put in a bit, replace some of the turf to take the worst of the look off it. But as I say, I'm not lawn proud, so that's really the only damage they do is to the lawn. They're very much house dogs. They don't like to be outside too much.
Yeah.
So if it's wet at all, like they'll barely go out the door. Um,
Does.
so
It sounds a little bit. They both sound a little bit like Ethel, who, yeah, doesn't like getting her paws wet. She's very. I don't know why, but we very much encouraged her to swim because she's a Labradoodle and she should absolutely love the water, but doesn't like getting anything above her ankles wet. So she'll probably jump over a puddle if she was out on a walk, so to save getting her feet wet. And again, if it's raining, she won't venture up onto the lawn to relieve herself. She'll stay on the gravel drive. So. Um, yeah, I remember the first time she ever encountered snow. Again, we talked about it earlier, but when the beast from the east arrived, by then she was a good, I think she was about 4 or 5 by then. That was the first time she'd ever encountered snow, and she simply didn't know what to do with it. So I let her out, and she refused to go and relieve herself. So after about, this went on for several days. This went on for nearly 3 days before I actually
well,
shoveled the snow off of the lawn to allow her to see the grass, and then and only then would she
would you
sort of
go?
yeah, yeah,
Well, our two are rescue dogs as well, so
yeah,
we really didn't know what we were getting with them. You can obviously get a certain sense of them when you meet them, but
yeah.
so it was a gamble, but luckily it worked out well. We had Robin first initially; she was the Labrador, but she was a very timid dog, and then after a year, we just felt she needed a friend, so then we got Maisie, the French Bulldog, and she has really helped Robin sort of come out of herself and learn how to be a dog. They both have very tough lives, but they're living their best life now.
Very nice too. Yeah, we considered getting another one to go alongside Ethel. And my mum and dad, I've told this story quite a few times, but my mum and dad got a dog during lockdown. And I see my mum and dad quite a lot, having worked with them for a long, long time. My dad, until he retired, worked with me every single day. So I was in and out of my parents' house probably 3 or 4 times a week. And Ethel would see, so, and if it was too hot, Ethel would stay with my mum during the day, and I'd pick her up again in the evening after I'd finished my work, so she wasn't in the van with me all day. But then my mum and dad got their sausage dog. They've got a miniature Dachshund called
Mhm.
Doris. And the look on Ethel's face when she first met Doris, and the look that she still gives now, 5 years on, and sort of, is she still here? What do you mean I've got to share Nana and Pops with somebody else? And the two of them get on. They do tolerate each other, but yeah, Ethel is so funny with me that she's very sensitive to the tone of my voice and the amount of, for instance, how loud I speak. So if I raise my voice at her in a certain tone, she obviously very much knows that she shouldn't be doing something, or she's approaching something she shouldn't be doing. And Doris, bless her, being a Dachshund, doesn't know her own name. um,
Okay.
I'm not going
Yes.
to say she's naughty, because she's not naughty, but she's very strong-willed and very opinionated. She goes off and does her own thing, because she's a Dachshund, and that's what they do. So you sort of say, Doris, don't do that, and Ethel will cower, or you say, Doris, go in your basket, and Ethel will go and get in Doris's very, very tiny basket, which is only, I don't know, about 18 inches across, and this 25-kilo Labrador sort of tries their best to sit in this tiny little basket.
That's
So we
exactly the same as our two.
really,
Yeah, and Maisie, the French bulldog, will climb in on top of Robin, and then Robin will she'll sort of, if she could roll her eyes, she would, and then she'll just
yeah.
let out the biggest sigh, like, why is this dog in my life? Everything was perfect before Maisie arrived.
So we made the very tough decision that we didn't feel that Ethel wanted a sibling. I think it would upset her greatly.
Yeah,
So it wasn't the right course. It wasn't the right direction for us to go. So yeah, that's where we are with dogs. So she's nearly 11 now. So I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon. Whereabouts can people, before we wrap up our conversation today, whereabouts can everybody find you, Conrad?
well, I'm on Instagram as that Botanic guy.
Hmm.
That's my sort of main place where I post. There are so many different options in terms of social media, but I think trying to keep one going is more than enough.
Yeah, I think you've knocked the nail on the head now. It's now a full-time occupation for me, maintaining 5 different channels. It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that Botanic guy on Instagram, Conrad, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really lovely to finally speak to you and get to know a little bit more about your gardening and what you're sharing online.
Thanks for having me on, Ben. Thank
That's
you. Good to chat to you.
been wonderful. I'll talk to you again very soon. You take good care now.
Talk to you again. Bye bye.
It was so lovely to finally catch up with Conrad in person and get to hear his story in a little more detail. As I said, his is one of the accounts that I've been following on Instagram for a very long time indeed. And to say that I'm slightly jealous of his very large collection of tree ferns is an understatement, but it's an absolute pleasure getting to enjoy them as he shares them online. So do make sure that you head over to his Instagram profile now and show his account some love. He uses the username That Botanic Guy. I hope if you take nothing away from today's episode of the podcast whatsoever, it's just that somebody else gives you the permission to take things a little bit slowly and very gently as we enter 2026. In my professional growing opinion, there is absolutely no rush to be getting on with anything whatsoever for several weeks yet. And as long as you're following along on Instagram, YouTube or TikTok, I'll make sure that I'm prompting you as and when you need to be getting on with things in the garden. Next week, I'm heading back up to Scotland, and actually we're going to be touching base once again with Katrina and Clayton, building a Food Forest Scotland, who joined me on Series 2 of the Gardener Ben podcast. We had so much to talk about on our first episode together, and I wanted just to touch base with them both and see how the growing season ended for them during 2025. So join me for a catch up with Building a Food Forest Scotland next week. If you do nothing else in the garden whatsoever over the next few weeks, do make sure that you go out and top up your bird baths, and if you do feed the birds, make sure that you're topping up your feeders as well. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you in association with Peter Beals Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold Medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, happy gardening.